Mine has been a life of much shame. On June 19, 1948, the body of acclaimed Japanese author Osamu Dazai was discovered on the banks of the Tamagawa Aqueduct in Tokyo, accompanied by the body of his lover, Tomie Yamazaki. In an act of shinju, the two had thrown themselves into the canal 6 days prior, and their bodies were found on what would have been Dazai's 39th birthday. Born in 1909 to a rich and influential family in the north of Japan, Shuji Tsushima, later known by his pen name Osamu Dazai, was a prolific writer of the post-war era. Infamous for wearing his misery like a badge of honor, Dazai was a controversial and complicated figure, respected for his authenticity but derided for his self-piteous demeanor. His writing intimately explores themes of social alienation, addiction, self-hatred, all tinged with awareness of the transitionary period of morality and great societal change he existed within. Written in the spring of 1948, No Longer Human is Dazai's final completed work, and centers around the shameful life of Yozo Oba, told in the form of 3 notebooks that divulge the cascading self-destructive events of his adolescence and young adulthood. Almost autobiographical in nature, its pages are drenched in a growing, undefinable dread, its legacy punctuated by Dazai's own troubled, disorganized life and tragic self-afflicted end. This incident of life-reflecting art colors the contents of his novel with a harrowing reality, its raw confessional tone becoming the account of a man driven to complete resignation. Brought to a wider audience through Donald Keene's translation in 1958, Dazai's work is captivating, horrifying, and intensely human. There is an irresistible and morbid fascination that creeps up on you while reading No Longer Human, an alluring force that glues your eyes to the train wreck unfolding in its pages. Paralyzed by an unrelenting fear of human beings, Yozo is set adrift through life. As you move through its chapters, his otherness begins to metamorphosize into something more than unease, deeper than terror, an overwhelming sense of divine and eternal torment. By genre definition, No Longer Human isn't a horror story, but I argue that it is undeniably one of the great works of existential horror. There's a fearful abyss nestled at its core, a hollowness that you can't help but stare into. It's an evocative title, suggesting the gradual, pitiful decay of morality and ego and an erasure of self. It forces upon you that very question. What does it mean to be no longer human? Developed by one J.R. Hudepohl and published by Top Hat Studios, Labyrinth of the Demon King is a slow descent into madness. It is a PSX-style first-person survival horror game, a dread-inducing experience built upon dungeon-crawling, brutal game design, and an uncanny retro aesthetic, all set against the backdrop of a demon-infested castle in feudal Japan. You play as an unnamed Ashigaru, a foot soldier on a quest to hunt down the eponymous Demon King, a malevolent entity that deceived and killed your master, Lord Takeda Nobumitsu. Rather than vengeance, this is more so a story of deep shame. You are the sole survivor of the ambush that wiped out your fellow men, your lord having sacrificed his own life to aid your escape from the battle, instead of the other way around. The world has entered the latter age of the Dharma, society is crumbling, war and famine ravage the land, and demons walk the very earth itself. This hopeless reality makes you question your will to live, and playing Labyrinth of the Demon King made me feel the same way as reading No Longer Human, swallowed up by fear and darkness. Within Hudepohl's nightmarish castle, things shift in the corners of my vision. The walls breathe and I find myself surrounded by grotesque and savage things. The same vein of existential terror permeates this game. The horror here is not Lovecraftian or eldritch. It isn't cosmic in its unfathomable nature or absolute sense of scale. It isn't purely gothic either, with its gloomy aesthetic and oppressive melancholy. There's something uniquely ancient and human about it, centered around the familiar chasm that exists between thought and action, one that we're all susceptible to stumble headfirst into. The horror here feels lived in, fearing oneself and the internal as much as the unknowable other on the outside. It is all-encompassing yet undeniably personal, like some quivering animal curled up on the jungle floor, equally terrified by predators and afraid of its own weakness. Both Labyrinth of the Demon King and No Longer Human, then, are works of existential horror built around shame, fueled by one's ability or inability to conquer it. The haunting quality of Dazai's prose and Keene's translation provides a framework of language to describe the unnerving atmosphere of Hudepohl's game. I find that the novel's words capture the type of fear perfectly, perpetual yet unprecise. It distills the exact emotion through a sort of triangulation, bouncing between meaning and metaphor, skirting around and brushing upon primeval feelings. It allows your humanity space to wander and fill in the blanks, just as you lose yourself in the labyrinth's decrepit corridors. Of course, you don't need to experience one to understand the other. They are completely separate texts after all, and both adamantly stand on their own as excellent horror experiences. But there is an interplay here that truly enhanced my time with these pieces of fiction individually. One heightens the other through shared moments of anguish, and it is this synthesis of a metaphorical hell with a literal one that I believe is meaningful and worth dissecting. My analysis here leans on the effectiveness of both mediums, using the novel as a lens to examine the game. I'll weave in events and descriptions from Yozo's journey into our expedition through the Labyrinth to paint a more vivid picture of the horror at work. My aim is to interrogate and extract a more holistic view of this creeping existential dread, where the Labyrinth is the physical manifestation of Yozo's descent into becoming no longer human. I want to pull the thread and see how it all unravels. As usual, this video is part critique, part retrospective, but most importantly, it's a love letter to one of the most affecting and terrifying horror games I've ever had the displeasure to experience. This is an attempt to make sense of the unknowable, an exercise in suffering and distress to glean some clearer wisdom, some rawer emotion and deeper understanding of the human condition. This is a journey to reconcile the crushing weight of existing in all its shameful glory. This is why I can't stop thinking about Labyrinth of the Demon King. I have seen 3 pictures of the man. You wake up in a miserable little encampment, deep in a long forgotten forest. A grey mist seeps through this dreamlike world, and you can hear the uncomfortable shuffling of things out of sight. Maybe animals, maybe the rustling of the trees around you. You gain your bearings and follow the eroded path just ahead of you. Already you feel a heavy isolation as you wander this shaded wood veiled in fog, tense and unsure of what lies in wait. Dazai's work begins in much the same way. An unnamed narrator looks upon 3 photos of our protagonist Yozo Oba. One of him as a boy, as a young man, and as an older man. The narrator struggles to make sense of Yozo's expression in each, attempting to paint a broad picture through these photographs of the troubled character we are about to meet. The artwork you see in this video comes from Junji Ito's adaptation of No Longer Human. Yes, that Junji Ito adapted Dazai's work and created his own horrific take on Yozo's story, and yes, it is worth a read as well. I won't spoil any details from it, and I will be using Ito's art more as a visual aid, since it naturally fits the horror aesthetic. Much like Dazai himself, Yozo was born to a well-off family, the son of a local politician. As a child, he is afflicted by an immense sense of otherness, unable to understand how humans around him operate. Yozo gives himself to clowning as the ultimate defense, deflecting any attempt at serious connection and always maintaining a facade to suppress the anger of others. Indeed, the more carefully you examine the child's smiling face, the more you feel an indescribable, unspeakable horror creeping over you. Society, Yozo argues, is an individual, and the incomprehensibility of society is the incomprehensibility of the individual. He is utterly alienated from the world, and it is this ontological terror that sits so far down inside of him that it feels primal. I can't even guess myself what it must be to live the life of a human being, Yozo says. Passing through the gate, you are undoubtedly crossing some sort of threshold. The comfort of daylight fades as you travel deeper into this cave, the tunnel twisting and contracting, lit only by candles. Up ahead, you stop and glimpse something dangling upside down, feasting on a corpse, illuminated by the flame of a torch on the ground. Cautiously, you approach the creature and we're treated to our first proper cutscene in the game. These loud, eerie cutscenes greatly enhance the atmosphere. leading into its lack of legibility and utilizing its low-res graphical style to generate a type of nostalgic fear. The screeching volume and janky animations carry a sort of found footage aesthetic, and whenever they show up in the game, they convey a palpable sense of panic, like you're playing some cursed video game. The monster retreats, leaving you to pick up the torch. Disempowered and barely holding on, the atmosphere is thick with dread, choking the air around you. Torch in one hand, you begin creeping down the decline before you, the cave's never-ending darkness threatening to swallow you whole. Unfathomable in its reach, the abyss stretches to the far corners of your screen like hands wrapping around your head, palms to your eyes, fingers pressed tightly against your temples. It's a crushing sensation, slowly squeezing and applying pressure. The light of your torch seems to shrink as you descend, as if the fire itself is wavering against the oppressive dark. The inky black around you contracts and then, a light, softly beaming in from a hole in the ceiling. You see something hanging almost impossibly over running water, a bucket dangling from a rope. You climb up and out of the mouth of the well, and suddenly you're outside. This transition feels distinctly non-literal, like you've been transported to a different dimension altogether. The castle itself, the eponymous Labyrinth, is a frightful liminal space, seemingly existing in a place beyond time and the physical, blanketed in a grey fog and suffocated by a tangible sense of despair. Its existence feels cursed, and this is only emphasized by its once human quarters and amenities, where we will soon explore and become lost in, transform into a decrepit breeding ground for evil. It's recognizable yet completely devoid of what you could describe as humanity, or a soul. The hazy, dilapidated castle becomes the objective correlative of Yozo's mind, haunted and unknowable, physically warped into forms unnatural. In the second photo, the narrator notes that Yozo has become extraordinarily handsome, with a rather adroit little smile. And yet somehow it is not the smile of a human being. It utterly lacks substance, all of what we might call the heaviness of blood, or perhaps the solidity of human life. It has not even a bird's weight. I imagine Yozo wandering this broken castle, pulling out his hair and unable to comprehend the terrors of the world swimming in his mind. It feels like the labyrinth itself is a projection of this fear, a grappling with existence that threatens to tear Yozo apart. Exploring the empty castle grounds, you, Yozo, all of us, we're beginning to tumble into the deep recesses of the unknown, clawing at any foothold that presents itself. Analyzing the final photo, the one of Yozo as an older man, the narrator is unable to tell his age, noting that this one is by far the most monstrous. The look on Yozo's face is something unknowable, so twisted by fear and dread and shame that it has become genuinely chilling, devoid of any individuality. I think that even a death mask would hold more of an expression, leave more of a memory. That effigy suggests nothing so much as a human body to which a horse's head has been attached. Something ineffable makes the beholder shudder in distaste. I've never seen such an inscrutable face on a man. Speaking of masks, you meet a girl praying at the foot of a large tree, her face hidden by a guise that gives the appearance of having her eyes gouged out. She is gentle and soft-spoken, warning you of the perils of entering the labyrinth, before reluctantly divulging a key piece of information. To face the Demon King in his lair, you must first conquer the castle's 4 towers, defeat their 4 respective wardens, and collect their 4 burdens. A simple Dark Souls-ass goal if I've ever seen one, a clear objective that provides all the necessary context for your quest. Next to her is a shrine, which you can pray at to manually save, as well as offer purifying incense to either upgrade your health or your stamina, a precious resource that you would discover as you progress through the game. With nothing left to lose, you breathe in your final breath of this damp outside air, before pushing open the heavy double doors and entering the first tower. Am I what they call an egoist, or am I the opposite, a man of excessively weak spirit? I really don't know myself, but since I seem in either case to be a mass of vices, I drop steadily, inevitably, into unhappiness. And I have no specific plan to stave off my descent. The Tower of Repetition is the labyrinth's first and most expansive level. Upon entering and praying at the shrine, the game calls your attention to the door on your left. Behind it, you see a priest wandering the halls on the other side, the exorcist mentioned by the maiden at the tree. The door itself is sealed by a strange contraption with 4 circular indentations, and unlocking this mechanism becomes the central puzzle of this tower. Pulling out your trusty broken katana, the first enemies you face are these ugly humanoid monstrosities with overgrown heads and rotting flesh. They are immediately aggressive, blindly pursuing you when they're not attacking each other. As a side note, I like this aspect of the labyrinth. Everything here is an enemy, not just to you but to each other, as if this demonic realm is driven to cannibalize itself. There is no harmony here, no natural order, just pure chaos that threatens to swallow everything that enters its perimeters. You make short work of this enemy and retrieve a white gem embedded in the head of one of these fallen demons, as well as a map of the tower next to its corpse. Climbing to the second floor, you are greeted with a grading transition as your character slowly creeps up the stairs. These transitions are as much a part of the horror as the enemies themselves. The slow creeping movement, the loudness of each scene, the focal point of a door sliding open, looking down descending steps, a double door swinging out into darkness. All of these short transitionary scenes elevate the tension, almost acting as mini jump scares as you explore the level, or accidentally stumble into them back first while trying to evade an enemy. There's a sort of timidity in the pacing of these transitions, slowly creeping forward, and I think about these doors and staircases existing within the mind of Yozo, demarcating boundaries where he refuses to cross. As a child, Yozo quickly learns to defend himself by clowning, dressing up his all-consuming fear of others by making everybody laugh instead. This mechanism prevents anybody from knowing his internal thoughts, and vice versa, creating a widening, uncrossable gap between himself and anybody else. Yozo describes this as his last quest for love, an accommodation he offered to others, a most precarious achievement performed by him only at the cost of excruciating efforts within. Since he cannot understand them, Yozo acts human to hide his utmost otherness. He does not want to be known, a child who never spoke a single truthful word. This crippling inability to connect is disguised by a jester persona, fun-loving and smooth-talking, refusing to let the mask of buffoonery fall away. The Tower of Repetition then is a trial by fire, a desire to train oneself to only engage in antics, to joke and act, to never be exposed for this falseness. There is a primal fear that permeates Yozo's mind and is projected into physical space, alienating him without mercy. He is unable to even answer back when criticized. I always accepted the attack in silence, though inwardly so terrified as almost to be out of my mind. Speaking of attacking, let's talk a bit more about the combat in Labyrinth for the Demon King. Labyrinth is slow, clunky, and starts off so unwieldy that you question if there's something wrong with the game and its input system. But I argue that this brutal pacing and intentionality, especially in its beginning hours, shines as one of the game's greatest strengths. There are a surprising number of options when it comes to your offensive moves. You can perform a light attack by simply pressing the attack button, or a heavy attack by holding the attack button down and then letting go, which allows you to break the enemy's guard if they're blocking and stagger them. You can also deliver a kick, which breaks their guard and is quicker to execute but does less damage. Aiming your kick at the ground allows you to stomp down, which is your main way of dispatching these annoying little bug enemies. It also looks fucking sick to crush demon heads under your boot. This is purely for visual flair, rather than a Resident Evil style mechanic where eviscerating their heads stops them from coming back. That said, there is one enemy, the Fury, that requires you to first deliver a blunt attack to knock them out, then stomp in their heads quickly to prevent them from coming back to life, which is a nice implementation of this simple mechanic. Your defensive options come in two forms, a sidestep and a parry. The former allows you to perform a quick evade, putting space between you and the enemy's attack. This is essential with enemies that have long attack combos where they lunge at you and hack away repeatedly, and this spacing tool gives you the option to both reposition and close in with relative ease. Your initial sidestep doesn't drain stamina, but performing subsequent ones within the cooldown window will. You'll often use this move to circle around enemies and slice at them from the side. In my initial playthrough, this was my tactic of choice. The parry in comparison feels a bit more situational, since your movement is slow while holding your weapon up. Holding the right mouse raises your weapon in the blocking stance, which you will hold for a set amount of time before lowering. Being attacked while in this blocking stance parries enemies, deflecting their attack and breaking their poise, opening them up to what the game calls a follow-up attack, which varies depending on your weapon. Surprisingly, there isn't any need to be precise with the timing here. The parry window is very forgiving and basically requires you to hold your weapon up once you see the enemy winding up. As long as you get hit with your weapon raised, the enemy's attacks will be deflected, opening them up to a counterattack. I wish there was more of a reward to timing a perfect parry that allows you to dispatch enemies in a single hit or maybe regain stamina, but it does feel like a distinct choice to fit the clunkier combat system, where managing stamina is meant to be an arduous task. Interestingly, this parrying system really clicked with me on my second playthrough. I had been so thrown off by the strange unpreciseness of the parry that I overlooked it in favor of the sidestep. But after getting a feel for the rhythm, blocking in advance, deflecting the hit, and retaliating immediately, this mechanic started to feel really nice. Experimenting with the speed of your attacks and the way each weapon felt different to parry with lends itself to an addictive cadence. Even better, I discovered that parrying range attacks at the right time, with your crosshairs on the enemy, will deflect the projectile back at them, obliterating them. There's a tactility here that I really like. The clear effort it takes to swing your sword, the weight of your weapon connecting with flesh, the schlick as you slice off a demon's head, or the bone-shattering crunch as it pops under your boot. It takes a bit of adjusting to adapt to its combat rhythm, but it just feels right for this game, defined by its unintuitive but deliberate heaviness. There's an almost turn-based groove to each encounter, where you have to struggle to hold your own. You're not a one-man army, you're hardly even a foot soldier. You're just one man gritting your teeth, and writhing back against the elements with broken katana in hand. as weighed down by your armor as you are by your burden for shameful vengeance. Perhaps the most puzzlingly generous mechanic this game has on offer is its death and revival system. It feels almost out of place that there are no souls or equivalent currency in this game to lose and backtrack to, and when you die you simply respawn at the last shrine you prayed at with full health, full stamina, and all your items still in your bag. Enemies you've killed don't necessarily respawn either, since that seems to happen randomly throughout the game. There isn't any real punishment here, no detrimental effect to dying, which is surprising for a game of this nature. Now, I don't want to argue that every game needs a bonfire system. In fact, its widespread and unnecessary implementation across gaming genres can be immensely annoying. But for this grueling King's Feud-inspired experience, it feels weird not having any downside. You would assume that the save system would be a central avenue for delivering tension, where death is to be avoided at all costs lest you are sent back to your last save, which could be 5 minutes or 50 minutes ago, depending on how brave you were in exploring. Instead, this infinite revival system reminds me most of the Vita Chambers from Bioshock, and unfortunately recreates the same pitfalls. It renders most combat challenges moot, and actually entices you to let yourself die and respawn at the last shrine to save resources by automatically being brought back to full health. It doesn't require a special finite resource to save or revive like ink ribbons or dragon crystals. The surprising lack of penalty for reckless play is made even more apparent with how common shrines tend to be, which undoubtedly strips something away from the survival horror experience when the necessity of survival is undermined in this way. Despite this, however, I'll be lying if I said I wasn't somewhat grateful for the implementation of this system. Based on vibes alone, I still explored cautiously, readying myself for potential jump scares and constantly checking my map to reorient myself because the atmosphere is just too damn immersive. But this liberal revive system also allowed me to take risks and venture out without making a purposefully tedious game even more painful to get through. There's a strange freedom in this ability to rush through the level, dodging enemies as you push forward and backtrack again and again. Opening your bag or looking at your map also becomes a sort of reprieve, since these actions pause the game entirely, giving you a moment to breathe as you plan your next move. I know it seems bipolar to levy this criticism that it's too forgiving and then immediately justify it, but I'll admit that I genuinely don't know if I could endure this game without the assurance of unlimited revives. As you fumble around in the dark, navigating the corrupted halls of this fallen castle, you can almost smell the rot and decay through the screen. The labyrinth's polygonal coarseness and noisy textures are highly effective in unsettling your eyes, fully weaponizing its retro visual style to bring to life an uncomfortable murkiness and illegibility. Blood and rust, flesh and wood, it's difficult to distinguish one from the other through the game's deliberate rendering of its low-res environment. This atmosphere is hard to pass, and is enhanced by the game's ever-present soundtrack, a relentless attack on your sense of hearing. The music is dread in audio form, even purposefully mimicking the groaning and breathing of monsters and the patter of footsteps alongside its orchestration. This is a cruel yet brilliant audio embellishment. Rather than a complete lack of a soundtrack to not distract from the experience, the ambient music strides the line between diegetic and non-diegetic, creating an eerie and droning soundscape that drills down the terror into your brain. It's hard to discern what's in the world around you, and this uncertainty keeps you in a constant state of panic. Even your own movement is enough to scare, since there's a slight delay between your walking animation and the sound of boots crunching on dirt and straw. This unease is baked into the music, and the dissonance is equal parts jarring and disarming, just enough to make you second-guess what you're hearing. The strained quality of its melodies hardly ever lets up, and you're never truly left in silence, creating a constant drumming of anxiety that embeds itself into the inner walls of your skull. After some exploration, you stumble upon the cat merchant in one of the second-floor rooms. She offers you a trade. She'll give you the key to the kitchen pantry that you need in exchange for a Buddha statue. You remember seeing one downstairs in a decaying and uncapped butsudan, a wooden cabinet that enshrines a gohonzon, or a religious icon. And if you've been thorough, you would have also come across a scroll warning that removing the statue from this altar will result in the relentless Nuribotuke coming after you. You don't have a choice but to plunder the statue, and we're treated to a horrific scene where a grotesque mutated thing crawls out of the butsudan, eyeballs dangling from its head, its malformed lumbering body shuffling towards you. This is the Nuribotuke, the Labyrinth's pursuer enemy, an unkillable monster that will frequently spawn from a miasmic portal throughout the castle and stalk you on your journey. You can down it momentarily, but it can't be parried and it hits hard, and simply being around its blackened and decaying form inflicts corruption on you, similar to the instant kill curse status from the Souls games. This is a great addition to an already tense experience, especially when you hear that audio cue play. Since it's so slow, you won't die to it often, but the Neurobotic and its terrifying aura becomes a constant, mobile obstacle that you have to prime yourself for, adapting your exploration around its presence by avoiding its attacks and outpacing it. Returning the statue to the cat merchant rewards you with the key to the pantry, where you can save the Kappa blacksmith, who happens to be the merchant's husband and was trapped in there due to a petty argument. He tells you to find him near a forge so he can help improve your weapons and armor before departing. Inside the pantry, you're able to grab sacks of salt, which you can use to melt away the flesh fungus blocking your path. Soon you stumble across a room denoted by a question mark on your map, and inside you find 5 statues, bodies wrapped in cloth, all wearing masks and hung from the ceiling. They wriggle around a bit, seemingly still alive, standing precariously atop crates on your tiptoes. This is the first proper puzzle Labyrinth throws at you, and it does require some thinking. Many of the escape room style and environmental puzzles in this game can be overwhelmingly obtuse, especially in later areas, and involve a lot of backtracking as well as inferring from the lore documents you find scattered around. Playing this game mostly blind, I found it very rewarding to pore over every written note and piece the clues together, leading to many genuine aha moments. Interacting with the statues causes them to rotate, and there is a piece of paper in the middle of the room where you can read an abominable account of a young boy who had his eyes gouged out and his tongue cut off. It recounts the specific order the perpetrators of the crime were tried in the king's court. Solving this puzzle hangs all of the statues and rewards you with the blue gem, which gets lowered on a rope and can be found dangling in this basement that you can access from exiting the tower. With 2 of the 4 gems in your possession, you press on. The looping level design of this first area is masterfully done, and you spend a considerable amount of time linking all of it together across its 3 floors. You open shortcuts, ascend and descend from different stairwells, and exit into new sections. The exploration here feels organic, intrinsically motivated by curiosity and extrinsically by a constant sense of agitation, as you're reluctant to spend too much time in one place before being hunted down by the Neurobotic. The Tower of Repetition is oppressive in its atmosphere and immersive in its puzzles and layout, encouraging and rewarding meticulous investigation. Perhaps the most unsettling place in this first tower is the basement, where you will find a memorial tablet that hints at the order the gems must be placed in to open the seal. Exploring a bit more, you can find the Kappa blacksmith chilling out next to a lit forge, who offers to upgrade your equipment if you provide him shurikodamas. Foul-smelling spherical objects said to contain a human's life force found in your, hole. You can find these valuable resources throughout the castle, and they serve as your main upgrade material. Kappas in Japanese folklore are said to seek out and extract shurikodamas from human victims by force, so I'd say you're doing a very noble thing by bringing them directly to the blacksmith. Descending even deeper to the bottom of this basement, only accessible through a winding carved-out tunnel, you discover the castle's central pillar, where you find the corpse of a princess set delicately, the red gem cradled in her hands. Her placement here, as the tablet above reveals, is to ensure this castle stands for all eternity. Something about coming across this serene yet ghastly sight, the princess's death pose tied to the enduring power of this hellscape. It's a chilling discovery. By this point in my playthrough, I genuinely felt like I was going crazy playing this game, brought on by the unrelenting music and the punishing dark. I imagine that navigating this maze of confusion and paranoia is not far off from how Yozo describes his tormented childhood. I am convinced that human life is filled with many pure, happy, serene examples of insincerity, truly splendid of their kind. Of people deceiving one another without, strangely enough, any wounds being inflicted. Of people who seem unaware even that they are deceiving one another. In the closing paragraphs of his first notebook, Yozo casually reviews what is perhaps the source of his immense mistrust of humans, and hints at the transgressions committed by his maids and manservants to him as a child, a scarring misconduct that he felt he could tell no one. This loathsome abuse of power corrupted him and made it so that his true nature was diametrically opposed to his role of the mischievous imp. Despite this sickening crime visited upon him in the safety of his own home, Yozo suffers in silence, believing himself rigorously sealed off from the world of trust or mistrust by the human beings around him. This lamentable dynamic is reflected at the end of this first tower, in the boss fight with the Ubume, a lanky long-haired demon cradling a swaddled infant to her chest, though you can't tell if she's caring for it or consuming it. Either way, she rises and attacks you relentlessly, wailing away as if protecting her child. You fight back in defense and find that this is more a battle of attrition. With a massive health bar and your minimal offensive output, burning through your resources feels unavoidable with your lack of ways to mitigate damage. Though she seems protective of a precious baby at first, the yokai resorts to swinging it at you wildly, shattering this protective persona. Ultimately, this boss fight isn't particularly challenging, heralding a flaw that Labyrinth will exacerbate as the game goes on. With the right spacing and stamina management, you dispatch this creature with scraping cuts and heaving blows, putting an end to a piercing cry. The baby falls from her arms, rolling away limply like a stone. It's never really revealed what it truly is, as a Ratman crawls on the frame, snatches the lost child, and runs off into the darkness. Standing over the corpse of this abusive, full maternal figure, you find a glowing red soul hovering gently in the air, shining with a light wholly uncharacteristic of this awful place, the belongings of one now gone. You interact with it and snuff it out, receiving the yellow gem and shouldering the first of your 4 burdens. I'm reminded of Yozo's musings that conclude this first notebook, about how women seem instinctively drawn to his brokenness. It was as if they could sniff it out, leading him to be taken advantage by them. Women found in him a man who could keep a love secret. With the final gem in your possession, you find a cool set of red samurai armor, return to the entrance of the tower, and slot the gems into the contraption, unlocking the seal. Finally, you have conquered this first trial, shouldered the warden's burden, and you are now allowed to leave. As you exit this hellhole, you come across a sign that reads Teahouse. Curiously, you turn left and step out into the inner courtyard, where a light drizzle makes itself known. It feels good to be out of the claustrophobic halls of the tower, and the grey open air, harmless and colourless, finally lets you breathe. In the middle is a desolate structure, in the centre of which is a tunnel just wide enough for a human to crawl through. Greeted first with another uncomfortable transition, forcing your body through the dugout hole, you are deposited into the aforementioned Teahouse, another liminal space that seems to exist outside the realm of the Labyrinth proper. It is a gentle place, immediately warmed by the light of a hearth and supported by a proper roof and 4 walls. You see the cat merchant off to the right as you enter, her wares splayed out on the counter and ready for your patronage. You go up and talk to her, and she encourages you to help yourself to some tea, to take the edge off. Before we do that, let's take a better look around. The tea house and its surrounds are a much needed and well-deserved moment of respite. Looking up from the main entrance, you can see an open pond, spacious and thick with fog, but the dreariness here is surprisingly comforting. Without the hostility of lurking creatures and imminent danger, the grey, misty environment instead feels soothing, devoid of terror. It has what the rest of the castle lacks: humanity. Outside, to the right of the pond, the blacksmith has set up shop by his forge, allowing you to upgrade your weapons in the safety of this meditative space rather than the fiery, infested basement of the tower where we saw him last. To the left of the pond is a sealed building, hiding a Shiriko Dama near the right window. Going back inside, you see a tea set has been set up neatly on the table. Sitting down on the tatami, you can opt to pour yourself a cup of matcha. This process of pouring yourself tea is also characteristically mechanical, and is all the more awesome for it. You have to first interact with the matcha powder not once but twice, and then ladle boiling water into the cup. Finally, you must mix your drink, before interacting with it one more time to down its flavorful contents. Though there isn't a way to mess up this mixture and poison yourself, just like everything else in this game, Labyrinth makes you work for it. This player-led interaction makes that first sip of tea a genuine moment of reprieve. I remember the first time I entered the tea house and mixed the matcha to drink, listening to the quiet ambience, immersing myself in this mystical place, my weapon sheathed and surrounded by the comforting warmth of allies, if not friends. Raising the cup to drink drowned my physical self in a unique sense of full-bodied relaxation, a sigh of relief, a breath that felt almost spiritual after the nightmarish torture that was the Tower of Repetition. It's a given that the matcha restores your health to full when you drink it, but also provides you 3 stacks of matcha that become a consumable and refillable healing resource. These stacks are always consumed first, and while they restore less than your other healing items like sake or ginseng tea, they are still a reliable source of health. This simple addition weaves the tea-making ritual into your every visit to this place, allowing you to refresh your brew of matcha and adding a mechanical benefit to slowing down for a moment. I love how bonfire-coded this all is, and sitting down at the table shares a familiar reflective mood to refilling your Estus flask in the cozy glow of a flickering flame. It's a straightforward system that encourages somber introspection on your journey, a contemplative exercise to calm the nerves before reluctantly trudging back into the lamentable darkness of the castle. My fear of human beings continued to writhe in my breast. I'm not sure whether more or less intensely than before, but my acting talents had unquestionably matured. Now living with relatives and attending high school, a pivotal moment in Yozo's life occurs when he makes a fool of himself in front of his class. In his typical antics, he jumps for a bar, purposely misses it and falls on his ass, only for his classmate Takeichi to come up behind him and call him up for it, saying that he did it on purpose. This accusation entirely unmasked Yozo's clowning, as if the world before him had burst in an instant into the raging flames of hell. This regrettable moment is a stone that Yozo will carry forever, a tipping point where his acting had failed him. Unable to let this go, Yozo sticks by Takeichi, showering his new acquaintance with a kindness rooted in a frightful insecurity, the same as keeping an enemy close. Moved by his scheming dressed as gentleness, Takeichi declares in a kind of demoniacal prophecy, I'll bet lots of women will fall for you. Yozo rejects this absurd proposition. One day, Takeichi shows Yozo one of Van Gogh's paintings. Inspired by this art, Yozo paints a self-portrait so dreadful, so raw, so heart-rending, fueled by his own inner agony that he refuses to show it to anybody except Takeichi, who prophesizes that one day he will be a great painter. After traveling to Tokyo for university with these two predictions taped to his forehead, Yozo discovers what constitutes as a friendship with a fellow artist named Masao Horiki in an art class. Horiki is crass, unsavory, and openly manipulative, but his uncompromising, shameless evilness disarms Yozo, who in him finds a sort of ally in the world. We were of one species, if only in that we were both disoriented. At the same time, there was a basic difference in us. He operated without being conscious of his farcicality, or, for that matter, without giving any recognition to the misery of that farcicality. Horiki introduces Yozo to the vices of tobacco, alcohol, and prostitution, through which Yozo heedlessly throws himself into, finding comfort in the arms of a prostitute where he, for once, doesn't feel the need to pretend. After being brought into a secret communist meeting by Horiki, Yozo, in his inability to say no, finds himself working on behalf of the student group, slowly rising through its ranks exactly because of his perceived dutifulness, despite not having a staunch political stance or ideology. This paints the picture of a young man entirely at the whims of the world and those around him. In his willingness to please and his impulsive actions for this left-wing movement, Yozo realizes a single truth, that there was something inexplicable at the bottom of human society which was not reducible to economics. Exiting the Teahouse, you move down the slope, enter through the double doors and head to the right. You step into the bathhouse, a large space with high ceilings, its pools corrupted by rot and miasma and other things unknowable. A new enemy runs up to meet you, an Akaname, reminiscent of a licker from Resident Evil in the way it skitters across the wooden floor and lashes out at you with its tongue. To the right is the control room, your central hub for this area. And here's a locked door and 2 rows of colored valves, all but one missing the necessary turning wheel to close and release them. With this, your objective in this tower is set before you. Find all of the necessary turning wheels, drain the color-coded pulls, and unlock this door. I actually found the second tower to be the most tedious one to complete, due to the puzzle's impenetrability and a constant need for backtracking. The Tower of Lamentation itself as a physical space is quite a big departure from the suffocating halls of the Tower of Repetition. It's less of a looping level and has clear paths in either direction that are more brightly lit, relying on the draining mechanic to open other sections of the dungeon. It is still teeming with demons and filth, but you can often sprint around unpunished, since running does not consume stamina out of combat. On that note, I went through the entire game only upgrading stamina at the shrines, since managing health never felt like a problem with the generous amount of healing items you come across. Like I've said before, this general recklessness is also compounded by the forgiving revival system, which encourages you to just get killed and reset to full health at a shrine when worse comes to worse. By only investing in stamina, combat and general movement quickly becomes manageable, and while this consequent empowering is appreciated and even necessary, it also unfortunately works to rapidly reduce the Labyrinth scare factor. The weapon upgrade system scales alongside this growth, allowing you to quickly power up your chosen armament using shurikodamas and go ham on enemies. As to which weapon you should select to bring you through your journey, Labyrinth comes equipped with a decent number of options. For such a small game, there is a surprising diversity to the tools at your disposal, with the weapon sandbox utilizing different movesets and damage types. Naganatas, for example, have a long reach and can switch up between blunt, slash, and piercing attacks. Pure blunt weapons like the Kanabo, Jite, and Bellhammer can be swung to smash demons with heavy blows. Another really fun weapon is the Tanto, a fast slashing dagger with sick animations that is highly effective for some good old slicing and dicing through enemies. There's even a bow and a firearm if you're looking for some long range options. For this playthrough though, I'm using the Great Dao, essentially this game's equivalent of a greatsword. You can find the 2 separate parts in fungus covered chests in the Tower of Repetition, which you can then combine into a large, high damage but slow swinging weapon, with a blunt follow-up that shoves enemies away. I'm a big fan of the blade's weighty playstyle, even if it's not always the most efficient, as you'll see. Unfortunately, since shurikodamas are so rare and you only ever find enough to upgrade one weapon to max, requiring 24, you're basically incentivized to invest in a single weapon per playthrough. And there is one weapon that clearly outperforms the rest. Though the broken katana feels painfully weak initially, the Kappa blacksmith can upgrade it and even offers to reforge it with another blade if he can find one suitable. Your broken katana is always reforged into the chrysanthemum blade when combined, but the sword which you use to reinforce it will determine its attributes and visual design. The rusty katana creates the weakest damaging one, the royal katana results in a higher damage variant, the kodoku gives you a poison effect, and the bloodletter combines to give your chrysanthemum blade bleed damage. Since the royal katana can be immediately purchased from the cat merchant at the Teahouse with currency, it's hard to resist simply buying the sword, bringing it to the blacksmith around the corner, melding it with your already leveled broken katana, and receiving a weapon that will easily carry you through the game, since it retains the upgrade level that your broken katana was at when you reforged it. All of the katanas share the same deadly moveset, with quick slashing attacks that allow for a lot of mobility and repositioning, and easily handles all of the game's bosses and enemies, except skeletons. Fuck skeletons. This potent combination of upgraded stamina and upgraded weapons oversimplifies the central gameplay loop, but combat itself begins to fade into an unfortunate redundancy. While it's still fun to hack away at demons with newfound confidence, it often feels like the game is actively encouraging you to avoid confronting enemies. After all, they still take a surprising amount of hits to kill, have punishing attack patterns that frequently result in you losing health, and most importantly, don't really drop any useful resources. I only ever saw shurikadamas drop from mini-boss style enemies like this little red guy and the big rat man. The demons become obstacles in your path that you quickly learn to avoid, rather than face head on. In the Tower of Repetition, the claustrophobic environment funneled you into combat without much say, but here in the bathhouse with its wider paths and hallways, it is almost entirely unnecessary as long as you don't get swarmed. This reduces the survival horror element quite dramatically, since combat serves little function and skirting around the demons allows you to avoid damage and save resources. While you can engage in fights for the sheer fun of it, and I definitely did, there's nothing to farm, nothing to gain, and nothing to motivate it. Losing this edge so early is a shame, especially when the combat itself is so mechanically satisfying. The Tower of Lamentation, in its more clearly lit and open layout, becomes more of an exploratory level dotted with obstacles to dodge, rather than the dark, oppressive torture that is the first tower. Tuning this difficulty balance perfectly alongside map design, item economy, and weapon upgrades is undoubtedly a monumental task, and it's unfortunate that these systems build upon each other so efficiently, instead of slowly growing from your disempowered state, since the crushing tension of navigating the labyrinth starts to dissipate once you reach this point. There's also a very simplistic magic system in this game that, while fun, never really necessitates itself or finds its niche in the combat sandbox of the game. Magic comes in the form of consumable talismans that you can find in your dungeon crawling, and later purchase in limited quantity. These talismans are essentially single-use offensive or utility spells, like Fist of Zochuten sending enemies back with a shockwave, Arrow of Hachiman dealing high damage, or using Yakushi's Grace as a quick heal or second wind to regain stamina. There are only a handful of them, and they all have generally situational functions, never really allowing you to specialize into a spellcaster type build. Their scarcity and lack of a reliable way to source more discourages you from utilizing them, since talismans both feel and are finite. It would have been awesome to have a magic-focused weapon that synergized with the spells, maybe restoring uses on kill, or having a weapon buff that would naturally play a bigger role in the sword-swinging playthrough. Overall, this bare-bones magic system has flashes of brilliance, especially when you're running around zapping heads, but it also serves up a lot of untapped potential that I wish incentivized its own use more often. Just like the weapon sandbox, it has a strong foundation and an addictive rhythm, and I'd love to see this aspect of combat expanded upon in a future installment. After a bit of exploring, you come across an Akaname stationed at a door, behind which you can hear crying. Dispatching the liquor and opening the door reveals the maiden from the start of the game. Once you save her, you receive the Recall Talisman, which is the only reusable talisman in the game and allows you to walk back to the Teahouse whenever you want. This quality of life feature is a saving grace in the game's labyrinthian design, giving you a reliable escape from any treacherous situation. While its unlimited use does add to the growing ease in which you traverse the castle, I still appreciate its inclusion. Not having to trek to and from the Teahouse vastly reduces the amount of backtracking and alleviates the potential tedium. The warp scene is also sick. Once you've worked your way through the valve puzzle, you drain one last pool on the second floor of the bathhouse, enter a tunnel, and squeeze through the passage to be dropped into a room overgrown with biomass. An odd, rotund golem-like creature turns to face you, rising from its feet. A symbol of avarice that has gouged itself in human flesh and grown fat. The Nupeppo is an ugly thing that hits hard. Using the Great Dao, I struggled with this boss quite a bit, since his sucking attack throws you off balance and it was hard to find openings to hit him with the weapon's slower swings. With my katana, I could easily circle strafe the boss and win without much effort, but the Dao's playstyle forced me to play defensively, stomping on the stupid bugs and only going in for attacks where I could. Eventually this beast goes down, shudders, and explodes, a literal embodiment of greed and decadence unable to be contained any longer. Nothing remains, except a soft yellow soul, and yet another burden to shoulder. Speaking of burdens, after visiting a cafe in the Ginza, Yozo falls for a married woman, an impoverished hostess named Tsuneko, who seems just as miserable as he is, her husband behind bars and herself in a state of destitution. Now in poverty himself, Yozo is drawn to her isolation, her resignation, her hatred towards being alive. She too seemed to be weary beyond endurance of the task of being a human being. In a foreboding vision of Dazai's own life, the two agree to commit Shinju and end their lives together, defeated by the world around them. That night, they throw themselves into the sea at Kamakura. Tsuneko dies. Yozo is saved. This immense guilt wrecks him, left alone once again and forced to survive, now threatened to be disowned by his political family for causing such a scandal. Yet, while this incident is excruciating, there is one moment that stems from this event that condemns Yozo even more. While being interrogated by the district attorney, Yozo coughs into a handkerchief previously bloodied by a pimple on his ear, before adding a couple more exaggerated coughs, hoping that this feigned sickness would convince the man sitting across him to assume that he was pitiably sick and show some sort of mercy. The district attorney smiles at him and simply asks, "Was that real?" As Yozo puts it, this is the one harrowing disaster which he shall never be able to forget. Alongside Takeichi's accusation, this exposing is one of the two great failures in his lifetime of acting. He has been at once too greedy and too off the world while thinking himself beyond it. Now nothing remains. He sits in the district attorney's office, distraught, his lover gone and his painstakingly constructed facade effortlessly shattered once again. He waits wordlessly in this Tower of Lamentation, looking out the tall windows at the evening sky glowing in the sunset, where seagulls were flying by in a line, which somehow suggested the curve of a woman's body. That is what I was, a toad. It was not a question of whether or not society tolerated me, whether or not it ostracized me. I was an animal lower than a dog, lower than a cat, a toad. I sluggishly moved. That's all. Exiting the Teahouse again and walking down the slope through the double doors, he turned left this time and entered the castle's prison. The Tower of Crushing Assembly is a nightmare to explore, and I'm all here for it. Samgata, or the Hell of Crushing, is where sinners face punishment for improper attitudes toward love, for egocentric love. Here, these prisoners of their own minds are tormented by being crushed between mountains, pounded by demons, or ground by heavy stones and rollers, an intense and repetitive crushing of the body and soul. The first thing you come across is a shrine and a scroll on a bench that describes the horrifying Gaikotsu, reanimated bones shuffling through the damp darkness of this basement. You move cautiously through the maze of holding cells, and then you hear a faint rattling, a crunching of bone on soil, getting louder and louder until a skeleton wielding a spear turns the corner and charges at you full speed. You hack away at it to no avail. Just as the scroll describes, your weapon bounces off, and you have to rely on blunt attacks to smash this enemy into a pile of bones. The map for this area is disorienting, and it doesn't help that this is probably the darkest dungeon you've been forced to navigate so far. Avoiding skeletons and ratmen, your first order of business is navigating these corridors into a large room covered in webs, ominously called the feeding room. We're greeted with another horrific cutscene as a large spider-like demon crawls out from a hole in the wall. Much like fighting Nupepo with a katana, this battle with the Tsuchigumo demonstrates how easily these big fights can be cheesed, especially with the right weapon. Channeling the spirit of Dark Souls 2, constantly circle strafing the enemy and hacking away negates any potential danger, without having to engage with many of the boss's attacks or mechanics. After putting this beast down, it doesn't drop a soul, which means it's not the warden we're looking for. You can see one of the cocoons glowing, and going up to the human-sized shape and interacting with it causes a priest to fall out, the one you saw at the start of the first tower. He's grateful for your help and warns you of the jailer who is said to stalk the halls of the prison. Unable to handle this demon infestation any longer, the priest retreats out of this nightmare and tells you to find him at the Teahouse later, where he will sell you talismans. You see a large bell at the landing of the staircase that you can interact with, but you are told you need a specific item to ring it, which makes clear your objective in the Tower of Crushing Assembly. Find the bell hammer, ring the bells, and summon a jailer. Unlike the bathhouse, navigating the prison is a return to the dreary, multi-layered navigation of the first tower, albeit less disorienting, since the level is structured more like a tree with linear paths that branch out. The central staircase here is the trunk, and you can navigate down to its roots by descending a level, where you discover a large hole that is too deep to jump into. Going up the stairs brings you to the execution room, where you find a meat hook and can open a shortcut back to the inner courtyard. Climbing up one more level brings you to a hexagonal room with a bell in the middle, where you come face to face with these creepy floating dudes. The Onryo glide towards you ominously, and while they can be repelled and put down by your attacks, they will resurrect again. The only way to truly defeat these vengeful spirits is by banishing them with a talisman, which sends their asses back to hell with this cool animation. I just want to say that I really appreciate the enemy variety in this game. All these yokai-inspired monsters are unnerving to face and demand different styles of engagement with an organic implementation of mechanics. For such a compact experience, it's impressive how consistently this game introduces new memorable threats. Most of the doors in this hexagonal room are locked shut, but going through the far right door brings you into what is probably my favorite sequence in the entire game. You enter a wide room with your surroundings barely visible and a path stretching out in front of you into the abyss. You're unable to see where it ends, but it's clear from the dimensions that this hall is spacious, and so you keep moving forward, as Onryo spawn from the shadows, all floating towards you, threatening to catch you if you slow down for even a second. A portal of miasma opens before you as the Neurobotike rises from its maw. Still, you dodge around it and press onward. You can hear the sounds of the demons behind you, swarming you like flies, but you can't look back. The hall feels impossibly long, another anomaly in the castle's construction. Surely there must be an end to it all. Then you see it, a raised rectangular structure. Maybe a doorway? No. It's a wooden gallows with a corpse dangling from its beam. You look up at the construction and cut down the body, receiving the hangman's rope. You sprint past the platform only to be met with a dead end. With no way forward, you must now turn back and trek through the long dark once more, this time facing the ghost head on. You dodge and weave between these enemies as you race back down the way you came, rushing past the Neurobotike as you exit this hellish room and back into the relative safety of the prison. With a cord of rope and the meat hook in hand, you can combine the two items in your inventory to form a makeshift grappling hook. You take this tool down to the bottom of the stairwell and interact with the gaping hole in front of you. But rather than throwing the rope down and descending further into the darkness as you expect, you instead fish out an unexpected item, the warden key, your ticket out of this tower. After being expelled from university due to the scandal, Yozo is taken in by a friend of the family, a man known to him as Flatfish, due to his facial similarity to one. After fleeing from this captivity to Horaki's house, Yozo meets a single mother named Shizuko, an acquaintance of Horaki, and eventually moves in with her as a kept man. The way that this strong-minded woman took care of almost everything else for him made Yozo more timid than ever before her. This leads him to enter a superficially normal relationship with Shizuko and becomes the surrogate father to a young daughter, Shigeko. Through this, he is able to find some semblance of normalcy, until one day he has a conversation with Shigeko, who has taken to calling him daddy with no show of hesitation. She innocently asks if God can grant anybody anything they desire. Yozo laughs at the thought, and claims that it is definitely possible for others, but not for him, since he disobeyed his own father. Shigeko struggles to understand this, but when Yozo asks her what she would wish for, she simply replies, "I would like my real daddy back." Yozo's fear of humanity returns in full force. Here in front of him was an enemy, an incomprehensible stranger, a stranger full of secrets. Yozo realizes that he can never let his guard down, or risk being swatted like the ox lashing out with its tail to kill the horsefly on its flank. He returns to drinking, and after coming home one day to a comically cheery scene of his wife and daughter playing together, he prays for their continued happiness and abandons them. Society is nothing more than an individual, a crushing assembly designed to comminute and reduce one to its lowest, most agreeable form, so as to maintain harmony and subservience. I was cursed by the unhappy peculiarity that the more I feared people, the more I was liked, and the more I was liked, the more I feared them, a process which eventually compelled me to run away from everybody. If you go left instead of right in the hexagonal room, you discover a long hallway of cells, at the end of which is a small table with a smooth shape set atop it, lit by the warm glow of candles. A pack of ratmen charge at you as if protecting the treasure, but after putting them down, you press forward, wary of ambushes from behind the bolted doors of prison cells. You find a pristine Buddha statue waiting serenely on the table. What is it doing here in this horrific place? I remember asking myself. Surely this is no place for an effigy of such a sacred nature. And then I thought back to the last time I saw this familiar form. On the first floor of the first tower, where I took one from the decaying and rotting cabinet and inadvertently summoned a demon that could not be killed. Perhaps if I bring this one there and set it down in its place, this force of nature would finally be pacified, with the sacred site it spawned from having been restored. And so that's what we do. Bringing the statue back to the Butsudan in the Tower of Repetition, the rage of the Neurobotike is quelled and the shambling corpse is appeased, the transgression made up for. Returning to the Tower of Crushing Assembly, you retrieve the bell hammer from the top floor using the warden key and set out to ring the 4 bells. One in the hexagonal room, one in the feeding room, one in the middle cells, and one near the execution room. This ritual summons the jailer to the execution room, which turns out to be another straightforward boss fight. He's lumbering and slow, and occasionally summons a skeleton that you can quickly smash out of existence. He's not as aggressive as Ubume, and circle strafing and smacking him a couple times brings him down pretty quick, much like the battle with Tsuchigumo earlier in the level. You free him of his burden, and he leaves behind another gentle glowing orb, a green soul. This is the result of a then and there struggle, in which the immediate triumph is everything. Human beings, as Yozo argues, cannot conceive of any means of survival except in terms of a single then and there contest. Realizing that the illusion of the world is simply an ocean of individuals waiting in judgment, Yozo learns to act more and think less, without the endless anxious worrying he knew before, responding as it were to the needs of the moment. This is how he eventually finds himself living with the madam of a bar in Kyobashi, offering no explanations, drinking his days away in the company of the patrons and regulars and entertaining them with his trademark showmanship. Like a child who squeezes his pet harder when he actually fears it a little, Yozo grips tightly to this fragile existence as a capped man, as an unknown comic strip artist, knowing no great joys nor, for that matter, any great sorrows. A year later, his life is once again pulled in a different direction when he meets Yoshiko, a young and naive woman whose earnestness convinces him to stop drinking. Wanting for once in his life to know that great savage joy, no matter how immense the suffering that might ensue, Yozo marries Yoshiko, hoping that those elusive halcyon days others seem to wish for could finally be his. The Tower of Crushing Assembly works for a time, grinding Yozo down into a functional, satisfied member of society, assuaging his fear and promising him a future full of potential. He has gone through this third trial and then has been remade through mimetic action and desire. Despite this, however, the embers of Yozo's trepidation still remains. This fear would be fanned by the realization that the joy obtained through his newfound agency would not necessarily be great nor savage, but the suffering which followed would be staggering beyond measure. The world, after all, was still a place of bottomless horror. It was by no means a place of childlike simplicity, where everything could be settled by a single then and there decision. I could believe in hell, but it was impossible for me to believe in the existence of heaven. With Yoshiko's grounding influence, Yozo is able to quit drinking and actualize his talents, becoming a somewhat successful cartoonist. He is genuinely taken by the wholehearted trust his wife has in him, and begins to faintly entertain the sweet notion that perhaps there was a chance that he might, one of these days, turn into a human being and be spared the necessity of a horrible death. Just as he is settling into this new lustful life, Haruki shows up unannounced to disrupt his peace with word from Shizuko, simply asking him to come visit her in Shigeko once in a while. Seized by this sudden reminder of his shameful past, Yozo can't sit still a moment longer. How about a drink, Yozo asks. Of course, Haruki obliges. Yozo grapples with his friend's reappearance, realizing that when they're together, they inadvertently metamorphose into dogs of the same shape and pelt. They bound out through the streets, spiraling back into mutually destructive behavior, one unable to resist the gravitational pull of the other. One summer night, the two sit on the roof of Yozo's apartment and get drunk together, deciding to play the guessing game of antonyms. As Yozo posits, the antonym of black is white, but the antonym of white is red. The antonym of red is black. The two men argue the antonym of crime, not able to settle on an answer. Is it law? God? Virtue? But isn't virtue the antonym of vice? Are vice and crime different? Virtue and vice are concepts invented by human beings, words for morality which human beings arbitrarily devised. In that case, the antonym of crime must be God. You can't go wrong if you leave everything at God. I'm hungry, Haruki says. Yozo tells him that Yoshiko is cooking beans downstairs and Haruki leaves him alone to ponder his question. Crime and prayer? Crime and repentance? Crime and confession? Crime and... no. They're all synonymous. What is the opposite of crime? Crime and punishment. Dostoevsky. What if he put crime and punishment side by side, not as synonyms but as antonyms? Crime and punishment. Absolutely incompatible ideas. With crime and punishment as antonyms, what lies at the bottom of the scum-covered pond? The chaos of Dostoevsky's mind. Just before he delves further into this horrible truth, Haruki returns to Yozo suddenly, telling him to come with him. From the top of the stairs, looking down into his room, Yozo sees Yoshiko being actually assaulted in their home by an acquaintance of theirs. Instead of intervening, Yozo is petrified. Haruki clears his throat loudly, making their presence known, and Yozo flees from the sight. He collapses back on the roof, looking up at the night sky, so overcome by despair that he doesn't know what else to do. I had now lost all confidence in myself, doubted all men immeasurably, and abandoned all hopes for the things of this world, all joy, all sympathy, eternally. This was truly the decisive incident of my life. Is trustfulness a sin, Yozo wonders? For him, whose own ability to trust was so cracked and broken that he was wretchedly timid, forever trying to read the expression on people's faces, he had come to view Yoshiko's immaculate trustfulness as pure and clean, like a waterfall among green leaves. But this horrid crime committed against Yoshiko shifts her nature entirely, jumping at Yozo's voice, understandably becoming tense and afraid, no matter how much Yozo played the clown. Yozo knows this outcome is due to his own inability to do anything. This crushing guilt and Yoshiko's growing fear of others all compound to estrange him from his wife, the normal life that he had craved imploding completely. As doubt gives birth to more doubt, Yozo once again falls back into drinking. One night, after returning home drunk, he casually gulps down a box of sleeping pills, lays in bed silently, and waits for death to take him. I'm reminded of Haruki's last words to Yozo on the rooftop after they witnessed the crime. This is basically hell. So long. The entrance to the fourth tower holds a circular altar, a bowl with 4 slots for the 4 wooden coins you now carry after conquering the Labyrinth's towers. You got the red wooden coin from Ubume, the yellow wooden coin from Nupepo, the green wooden coin from the jailer, and the blue wooden coin, well, you've actually had that one in your inventory alongside your broken katana since the beginning. How strange. Placing the 4 wooden carvings in the bowl, the door ahead creaks open, inviting you into the embrace of the final tower. The Tower of No Interval is, for the first time, an actual tower. It ascends into the sky, a set of stairs coiling endlessly, spiraling around and around as you start your long trek up its spire. You hear the familiar ding of a bell as the Nirobotake crawls out of its hell pit somewhere behind you, before giving chase as you continue to sprint up the tower. The soundtrack here sets a tense choral element against the rhythmic plucking of strings, perfectly dramatic as it chants and crescendos and propels you up the spiraling staircase. This long passage feels like some divine punishment, fitting in its declaration of no interval. In fact, the scroll you find in one of the other towers even states, "The torments of this hell are so severe and so evil, I cannot write them down." This ascent begins frantically, before soothing into a meditative state, in which you find a sort of freedom, a lightening load, a dissipating tension, a type of happiness, or as Yozo describes it, the very bottom of agony. Whatever lies at the top of this tower, your suffering will soon be answered. Yozo wakes up 3 days later, having survived once again. Entering into an affair with a crippled woman who runs a nearby pharmacy, Yozo weans off the alcohol but becomes a full-blown morphine addict, swapping one inferno for another. One day, Haruki shows up, this time with a gentle smile, the like of which Yozo had never seen before on his face. "I hear you've coughed blood." Yozo's completely shattered and smothered by that one gentle smile. With that, he is bundled into a car by Flatfish, Haruki, and Yoshiko and taken to a hospital, with Flatfish promising him that he will get the treatment he needs. As the key grates in the lock behind him, Yozo realizes he is not in a hospital but a mental institution. He was no longer a criminal. He was a lunatic. He had wept at that incredibly beautiful smile Haruki had shown him, and forgetting both prudence and resistance, he had been brought here. And now he was a madman, or perhaps a reject. To Yozo, he has been disqualified, having now ceased utterly to be a human being. As you reach the top of the tower, you enter a small room. The final scroll you read sits unassumingly on the table ahead. You open it and it has the title, The Hell of Repetition. It describes the fate of those who have committed violence against others and destroyed life in any form, full of rage and hatred. In this hell, the sinners seek each other out and rip each other to shreds, before being beaten into a mangled mess of flesh and bone by the wardens. The reviving wind of Senjira then brings these sinners back to life again to suffer endlessly. Thereafter, a chilling wind will blow through the realm while a voice from the sky cries out, "Revive, revive," and the sinners will be restored to their former shape to begin the torture again. This hints at a looping fate, recontextualizing everything you've done up to this point. You've always had the blue wooden coin with you, even before you entered this cursed labyrinth. Did you receive it from killing the Demon King in the previous cycle? Does it belong to your slain lord? Are you the fourth warden? Whose burden did you shoulder to have that coin in your possession? It feels like there's no way out, that you are doomed to return to that Dai campsite, alone, only to squeeze through the claustrophobic tunnel leading into that gaping chasm, where you climb the rope and enter the Demon King's castle, to experience repetition, lamentation, crushing assembly, no interval, all for the second time, for the 100th time, for the 1000th time. Knowing the cycle that awaits, you proceed up the stairs, which opens up into a great expansive space at the far end of which is a temple-like structure glowing a hellish red. An ominous figure stands at its center, beckoning you. Finally, you come face to face with the Demon King, and what little ceremony the monarch affords you, uses it to taunt you about the death of your lord. You still carry that blade. the other half still embedded in your master. Do you hope to cut me down with it a second time? And then it begins. When I first did this boss battle with my improved Chrysanthemum Blade, I absolutely wiped the floor, but this time with the Great Dao proved a significantly harder challenge. After dying multiple times to the stupid long-range attacks of the Flying Skulls, I changed my strategy and just went all out on the offensive. I realized you could also bait the king into the skulls just as they explode, dealing massive damage and stunning him. It's a shame really, since I'm sure most people will use their upgraded katana to make quick work of this final encounter, being the path of least resistance, without really seeing any of the mechanics at work. But I feel like my time with the Dao has exposed me to a more genuine challenge. By simply limiting myself to this weapon, it has allowed me to experience gameplay I wouldn't have seen otherwise, which in turn makes me much more appreciative of the combat and the boss battles in this game on the whole. Thank you for your service, Dao Blade. Cutting down the Demon King, his head flies clean off and rolls to a stop, only for a pair of demonic jaws to erupt out of his beheaded neck and lunge at you, before cutting to black. 3 months after being placed in a mental institution, Yozo's eldest brother arrives to take him out. He informs him that their father has died, and arranges for him to be sent away to an isolated place, leaving Flatfish to tie up all his loose ends in Tokyo. He was now a reject, exactly as Yozo feared. Retiring to a house at a hot spring on the coast, far away from human society, Yozo watches as the world continues to turn, now feeling neither happiness nor unhappiness, affirming to himself a new truth about the hell of existing. Everything passes. There is no interval for Yozo Oba. He is doomed to live a life apart from the rest of the world, cursed with a paralyzing fear that prevents him from ever perceiving himself truly. In the final turn of the knife, where the passage of time is felt so dilated that you would assume Yozo must now be much older, our protagonist ends his third notebook, punctuating his lifetime of grief with a simple statement. This year I am 27. My hair has become much grayer. Most people would take me for over 40. I never personally met the madman who wrote these notebooks. You wake up in a dark cave, and you see a torch marking the shore of a running stream just ahead of you, flowing west. You've slain the Demon King with your shattered blade, the other half of which was buried in the corpse of your master. Who was the Demon King really? Did you betray your own lord? There aren't any clear answers to this question. The Labyrinth is a purgatory, with you at its center, unable to move past the shame of your life being preserved at the expense of the one you've sworn to protect. You step into the running water and wade through its current. You see that it flows out into the world outside, a light pouring through at the end of the tunnel. The river itself is dotted with mementos from your journey through the labyrinth. A shrine, a turning wheel from the bathhouse, the Buddha statue from the Butsudan, and the Demon King's mask all sit lifelessly in this river of cleansing. As you inch closer to the exit, the world around you is bathed in light. It washes over you like a warm embrace, an inversion of how you began your journey. It is a direct contrast to the lurid, unfathomable darkness that envelops you in the beginning, forcing you to grasp onto a lowered rope and haul yourself out, only to enter a twisted realm of demons and evil, like a traumatic cesarean. Now you are pushed through this narrow canal, moving towards the light as you are gently expelled back into the real world. Is it a rebirth, a redemption, or merely the end of a dream? Either way, there is a sense of metamorphosis. The light blinds you as you step out into the open, and then a peaceful image of trees swaying in the breeze. In the novel's epilogue, the unnamed narrator reviews how he had come across Yozo's notebooks, having himself been acquainted with the madam at the bar in Kyobashi in 1935. 10 years and 1 world war later, the narrator stumbles across a coffee shop in Funahashi run by the same madam, who curiously asks if he ever knew Yozo as the two reminisce about the past. When he answers that he never met the man, the madam passes him 3 notebooks and 3 photos, telling him that maybe they'll make good material for a novel. The narrator asks if the man who wrote the notebooks was still alive, but the madam doesn't know, only that these mementos were anonymously mailed to her in Kyobashi 10 years ago, no doubt by Yozo himself. In fact, she had only recently read these journals. "Did you cry?" the narrator asks. "No, I didn't cry," she replies. "I just kept thinking that when human beings get that way, they're no good for anything." The narrator then assumes that surely she must have harbored a lot of disdain for Yozo and the turmoil he had personally inflicted upon her, that she must have suffered a hell of a lot at his hands. The madam simply replies, "It's his father's fault. The Yozo we knew was so easygoing and amusing. If only he hadn't drunk. No, even though he did drink, he was a good boy, an angel." Yozo himself is undoubtedly a detestable protagonist. His inaction, his self-victimization. You might be sympathetic to his plight, but he is far from a paragon. He is in all parts an indictment of a person's pitiable, self-loathing tendencies, a wavering reflection of a pained artist, and an enduring cautionary tale. Dazai recounts these things as if they were truly his experiences, without sentimentality, revealing the casual cruelties of life in its rawest form. No Longer Human is fascinating to me because of its introspection from Dazai. Yozo's story feels like his outlook on life pushed to the absolute extreme, a fantasy of self-deprecation and thorough unresolvable isolation. Yet Dazai removes himself from this shameful existence in the novel's epilogue, taking on the role of an outsider, the narrator, and ending this tale with a simple observation by one of the only people who knew Yozo. I find myself constantly thinking about those final lines. He was a good boy, an angel, and how it leaves you with a bitter pill to chew on. From the mouth of somebody who had truly spent time with the man, the madam's word has to be taken as is. After all, she is the one primary source, the one voice and soul who can genuinely vouch for Yozo's place in society. As Keen describes in his translator's note, we are made to realize the incompleteness of Yozo's portrait of himself. In a way that most men fail to see their own cruelty, Yozo had not noticed his gentleness and his capacity for love. This final remark by the madam, this final judge of character, reveals to me the true terror of existing. This clash between outward expression and inner turmoil, and a unique human inability to reconcile the two, must mean that we all live a life of duality. And that's the tragedy at the heart of this story. That perhaps someone we love may remain forever unknowable to us, that others may never know our true selves, that the distinction between the external and the internal is an insurmountable divide, that, try as we may never even know ourselves. Watching the trees sway in the breeze as the credits roll, I'm reminded of Yozo's observation: everything passes. Staring up at the beauty overhead, there are two potential outcomes of this ending. As hinted by the blue wooden coin, the reviving wind, and the hell of repetition itself, the scene of a rustling canopy could take place just moments before the start of the game, with you lying down at your campsite looking up at the sky. It won't be long before the fog rolls in and plunges you back into your eternal torment, and you're forced to enter and endure the reviving Naraka once again. Perhaps it's what you crave, the feral internal bursting out into an external savagery, nothing more than a violent, debased creature. But I would also like to believe that, against all odds, you may have finally escaped that cycle of self-inflicted punishment, that you have atoned for your sin and ceaseless conflict and have been reborn. The self-flagellation of your soul has been confronted and put to rest, and the labyrinth's power over you has been broken. Roused by the sound of leaves and the wind, you wake gently into a world with no fog, no demons, no fear, and no shame. You are a human, fully formed, where the external serenity now reflects an internal sense of peace. Ultimately, which you decide to believe, which reality you prefer to exist in, is entirely up to your own happiness or unhappiness. Labyrinth of the Demon King is one of the most masochistic experiences I've ever put myself through, and I don't regret a second of it. Rather than shocking you with small, sporadic doses of horror, this game hooks you up to an IV that drip feeds a constant flow of genuine, concentrated terror directly into your veins. The fear that this game relishes in seeps so deep into my bones that it's difficult to quantify, but that's why I made this video, to try and make sense through different avenues the indescribable dread that ticks away in my mind. Labyrinth is short, but it doesn't overstay its welcome. My first playthrough only clocked in at 7 hours, and in spite of some tedium in its middle section, it feels generally sharp and to the point. The short runtime can make the game feel a bit like an extended demo or a proof of concept, but its compact length is also a clear strength. It encourages you to go back through it and experiment with different weapons, bounding from objective to objective and memorizing its rhythm. A cadence that is not unlike Resident Evil, where you can breeze through things pretty easily after the initial grueling run. I would love to see this game's mechanics and level design fleshed out even more in some sort of sequel or expanded version. The first tower is undeniably the peak of the game, with you at your most disempowered and the scares and atmosphere at its most terrifying, refusing to let you breathe for even a second. Though the preceding levels don't quite reach the same heights, there's a special charm to the package being as concise and persuasive as it is, one that could be ruined by stretching out its runtime or adding on unnecessary baggage. As of making this video, a new Game Plus mode has been announced and should be out not long after this upload. I have no doubt that it'll be an excellent addition, allowing you to try new weapons, rejigging enemy spawns and variety, and enabling a more emergent gameplay style with an appropriate jump in difficulty. If you're watching this in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments what your new favorite weapon is and what that stupid basement puzzle unlocks. Once again, it's hard not to imagine what more this game could be. but what you can experience right now is already incredible and resonant, and I can't seem to stop thinking about it. It has clear faults and shortcomings, sure, but it's elevated by an uncompromising commitment to its atmosphere, utilizing its audiovisual style to craft a deep, unsettling immersion. It succeeds in what it sets out to achieve, and achieves it in a way that feels deliberate, focused, and most importantly, memorable. I would love to see how these core mechanics can be extrapolated and built into a media experience, but what we've got here already shines brilliantly on its own, with a luster that you can't help but admire, especially when you remember this was developed by one guy. I found myself consumed by the game even when I was away from my computer, haunted by its presentation and craving to plunge its depths, but an even more overpowering emotion was a genuine fear to engage with it, scared to even imagine myself sitting in the dark with my headphones in and playing it. There were times I wanted to stay as far away from it as possible, reluctant to be drawn into its dark spiral. Labyrinth sears itself into your amygdala and provides a push-pull sensation that feels intensely, undeniably human. The anxiety that gripped me while navigating the castle's halls was the same type of dread that flooded my brain while reading through the agonies of Yozo's life. There's a fight-or-flight response that gets triggered both by Dazai's words and the bell of the Nirobotake being summoned. One more cerebral, the other more full body, but both undoubtedly affecting me in a distinct physiological way. Reading No Longer Human's like perusing the diary of a person passing you in the street, a complete stranger, an old acquaintance, a neighbor you see walking their dog. It could easily belong to your co-worker, your dad, your sister, your best friend, your kid. These thoughts secreted away, reluctant to be known by anyone, can belong to anyone. By the end of the novel, Yozo simply disappears, his pained existence vanishing into the ether. No one knows where he landed, how he ended up, whether he lived on or died miserably. In my day-to-day life, I try not to see myself in Yozo Oba. In fact, I feel more inclined to oppose everything he stands for. His lamentable outlook on life, his constant self-pity, his victimized mindset that shackles him. Yet, I can't deny that some part of him is present within me. It is this recognition, I think, that sparks empathy, that by scavenging this small shred of camaraderie with his struggle, we can better understand our true nature as human beings. I believe that there's a bit of Yozo in all of us. Something so dark and spiteful and frail that we have to actively fight to ignore it, suppress it, bury it in an effort to become normal and functional. While it's tempting to reduce Dazai's philosophy into this harrowing depiction of a spiraling life, I think that would be a mistake. I believe that Yozo's dispossession is more a cautionary tale, reflecting elements of Dazai's outlook but pushed to the extreme, to envision or perhaps fantasize what it might look like to fall completely to despair. In his other notable work, The Setting Sun, characters also embody many parallels to the real-world author, but the fiction carries a different sort of weight as it explores other possibilities for hope and what it means to live on with the struggle. In another short story, Cherries, written in 1948 and one of his last, the wariness of the world returns, but it ends with a small act of rage and passion. Just as No Longer Human concludes with the notion that the individual is truly unknowable, there is no way to ever perceive this writer's internal truth. Needless to say, there is a complexity to Dazai's artistic expression, and though his life ended in a tragedy that arguably cemented his suffering, Yozo Oba is not Osamu Dazai. No Longer Human as it is presented is not the author's death letter, but rather a brutal and interrogative conversation about humanity, a dialogue with the inexplicable thing that lies at the bottom of society. Sitting in this vessel of grief is challenging and uncomfortable, and Labyrinth of the Demon King feels like the physical embodiment of this. As you map out the oppressive, maze-like environment, holding on to a fragile sense of hope, all of it feels intimately reflected in Dazai's account of a life full of shame. Labyrinth of the Demon King may not be the best survival horror game I've ever played, but it is definitely one of the most affecting in the way it fully immerses you in a formless anxiety. Similarly, No Longer Human is not the most pleasant read, but its foreboding quality is like a thought contagion that grows roots in your mind. Both exist as sublime pieces of existential horror, a fear of being that cannot be captured in words. The feelings which assailed me as I looked up at the summer night sky heavy with rain were not of fury or hatred, nor even of sadness. They were of overpowering fear. Not the terror the sight of ghosts in a graveyard might arouse, but rather a fierce ancestral dread that could not be expressed in 4 or 5 words, something perhaps like encountering in the sacred grove of a Shinto shrine the white-clothed body of the god. My hair turned prematurely grey from that night. Together we've gotten lost in the darkness of the labyrinth, and together we've traced the life of a troubled man who met a troubled end. We've pulled at the string and unraveled the anatomy of fear itself, and for a brief moment, we have felt what it means to be no longer human. Happy Halloween everybody, and thanks for getting to the end of the video. I had a lot of fun making this one and hope you all found it somewhat interesting and spooky. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment and subscribe because that really helps the video out. If you want to support me further, you can check me out on Patreon. It's a single tier and it's about the price of a coffee a month where I'm from. I write up a monthly update post on there and you also get your name in the credits. Speaking of which, huge shout out to my first Patreon members, King Jaden, funny name for YouTube engagement, Nicholas Chow, and RiceJ11. Thanks for the support so far. These videos are a solo effort, so I really appreciate your patience between uploads so I can make them as good as they can be. Since y'all are still here, the next video is gonna be on Yakuza 6. Okay, I'm gonna go play Labyrinth on New Game Plus now. Thanks for watching and see you soon.